you doing?
I'm going to see if I can put it on YouTube. So outline and can everyone write down this essay and we'll look at it together? Okay. Outline and evaluate the view that parent and child relationships have changed. In the contemporary UK, or it might say over the last 40 years. Okay, and then you've got the argument, so Chloe's saying, could it be more, less intimate? We could talk about how it might be more intimate.
Do both sides of the argument in 33, isn't it?
You can do both sides. You would want to do both sides of the argument in 33. So you could talk about definition. So you could talk about issues like traditional idea of the parent-child relationship. So what do you think, Courtney, would be the expected traditional, what we usually expect parent and child relationships to be like? Having a good bond. Okay, what else could we add, Ebony? Children being seen, not heard. Anything else that you think is normally expected, Madiha?
Children should follow what their parents say.
Children should follow, so obedience. So traditionally, according to Wendy Stainton Rogers, there are two conflicting views of children. So traditionally, children are seen as innocent. So innocence is an aspect of the social construction of childhood, which means they need support. They need care and they need welfare from parents and from the government. But also they're seen as potentially wicked, selfish creatures. So they need control. And so they need to be obedient. They need to be not heard, but to obey the voice, the words of their parents. They need a bond, so they need support based on an emotional bond with parents. So, who would agree that the relationships have changed? So this is part of the social construction of childhood, which is one of the ways in which we construct age identities. And roles. And so the parent-child relationship is based on parent in control and supporting, and child being controlled and being supported and dependent. So dependency compared to independence of parents. Children dependent, adults independent. Providing for others and responsible. So who would agree with this? Who would agree with the view and the question? So in the first part, we've done an introduction where we define key terms. We make reference to the fact that age is socially constructed. Parent-child relationships are based on the social construction of childhood and adulthood. The views that would agree with this statement in the question would be, and then we can list them to give a plan for the rest of the essay. So who would agree with the view in the question?
New right.
The new right. Okay, so the new right perspective. Anyone else that you think? Postmodernist. So the theorists that always focus on change the most are the most contemporary theorists, New Right and Postmodernists. The other sociologists talk about change in different ways in a modern society. This is about a contemporary society. So they're contemporary theorists in terms of contemporary, that are most up to date. And then in terms of other views, which may criticise or disagree in different ways, we've got functionalists, Marxists, feminists, interactionists, okay, social action theorists. And then we could go into the New Right then. So for the New Right, we could say that there's a moral decline. What kind of studies could we put in there? So we've got the New Right, concept of moral decline affecting parent-child relationships. Mothers married to the state, feckless fathers. Murray argues an underclass who are benefit dependent. We could use Dennis to talk about absent dads and the lack of role models. And we could say that there's a concern that parent-child relationships have undergone a decline. How could you evaluate that view? How could you criticise that? So in evaluation of the New Right, you can say they blame individual families and communities.
They popularise one type of family, the nuclear family, and make other type of families feel lesser.
So they overplay the nuclear family, they undervalue alternatives. They blame families for problems like poverty, which are a result of the wider system of society, as a result of the economy. So you've got two perspectives you can use for these two evaluative points. Number one, they blame families for problems that are a result of the wider economic system. You could use the perspective of who would blame the wider economic system of capitalism? Marxists. So you can say this would be supported by Marxists. Okay, they overplay the nuclear family and they undervalue alternatives to the nuclear family. So say feminists would support this because they say alternatives can be better. The nuclear family is patriarchal. The New Right ignore these problems. Okay, then we could talk about the postmodernists. So the postmodernists, they wouldn't see it as decline. So what would they say about the developments? So part 2, postmodernists, second major paragraph. Mariam, what would the postmodernists say about changes to society? More diverse. So they criticise the New Right for overplaying the decline and they'd see it as more diversity. What else would they say about society, Courtney, the postmodernists? People have more of a choice. So we could relate this to family relationships, parent-child relationships, because you can talk about increasing changes socially, politically, economically and culturally. We have more open society, the way in which we work and consume has changed. Different groups have more rights. The importance of the family is competing with the media. We live in a media-saturated society. So there's studies like Garrett, who talks about fathers who are more intimate with their children because there's new types of fatherhood, like based on the new man, new types of masculinity, changes culturally to what masculinity means in our culture. And you could refer to the EOC study in the book, Hatter, and the types of dads. What are the different types of dads? There are 4. Can anyone identify all 4 of them? Good, so we've got types of dads, we can reel them off like that. Okay, we can say parent-child relationships aren't changing. Postmodernists have emphasised how there's greater choice. With divorce increasing, Beck and Beck-Gernstein would say that there's greater individualisation. This means that we've got more ability to exercise our preferences and have autonomy, the ability to independently think about what we want. But since divorce means that the marriage relationship is less likely to last for life, the parent-child relationship could be the one relationship that lasts, and people are more likely to put effort in to maintain that relationship and that bond. So you've got the development, and a contemporary example of this is super dads and fathers for justice, where men are choosing to fight for their right to have contact with children because their role as men has changed. Is that okay? Do you want to be in it?
Oh, no.
Yeah? You can write stuff on the board if you want.
No, I won't.
Okay, rights. So you mentioned rights. Okay, so the rights of the child. And we could mention the children. What's the act called? 1989. Child. Yeah, you could mention the Child Support Agency, yeah.
Was it asking us to care?
And that, I think it's 30% of fathers or parents outside the family don't play an active role financially or emotionally with the child.
30% of fathers don't play an active role economically and emotionally with their children. So the Child Support Agency was created by the government. So that's an example of a social policy in our contemporary society, which suggests that the government is trying to respond to changes in family life. Some of this can be seen as influenced by the new right or conservative view that family life should promote the support of children, so it fits in with the traditional social construction of childhood. So the government is trying to pull things back. Okay, the functionalists might argue that some of these changes are overplayed. In the next major paragraph, we could say that there are many continuities as well as changes in family life. Which family type remains the majority type? The traditional nuclear family is still the majority type. 50% of families are nuclear families. So Robert Chester talks about the neo-conventional family. He says that the family is neo, but it's also conventional, traditional. So it hasn't changed as much as some postmodernists would argue. So he might suggest that the data from the Family and Parenting Institute, which suggests that mothers spend more time, not less, with their kids since the 1970s, suggests that the decline of motherhood and fatherhood is overplayed. So the Marxists argue there's pressure, like in terms of part-time work. Mothers may say that they spend more time with their children, but particularly within the working class or from low-income backgrounds, families struggle because of the pressures of capitalism. The functionalists could be seen as overplaying the positive nature of family life and ignoring the dark side, which includes this pressure It's a useful evaluative point. So the pressure, part-time work, mothers, working class families on low incomes, and consumption. The idea that the family has become a unit of consumption, this benefits the rich. Parent-child relationships are now based on pester power. Children influence their parents. They have power to irritate or keep annoying their parents until their parents buy them consumer products and services. This promotes and benefits the rich and ultimately exploits the family. So it's exploitative and harmful. Parent-child relationships are changing, but not in a positive way, Marxists might argue. So we've still got capitalism. Feminists. So the feminists might criticise earlier views for ignoring the problem of exploitation due to patriarchy. Women are exploited as mothers, as wives, according to Germaine Greer, radical feminism. Women perform a triple shift: housework, paid work, and emotion work, which is often invisible and ignored. For example, in terms of planning family meals, caring for their husband. Oakley argued women do 4 times as much housework as men. They perform a dual burden. Even if they're doing paid work, they still do the majority of the housework. So the feminists would argue that parent-child relationships are burdensome for women, that the balance is still in favour of men, and there is an EOC study where it said that men feel that women are naturally better at childcare. So this supports the feminist view because it shows that men still feel, and there's still this culture of femininity, men still feel women are naturally better at childcare. Feminism. So we could evaluate feminism with postmodern feminism, like Catherine Hakim. She says 60% of women are adaptive. That means they combine work with the house role in terms of having a role in the home. And so she would say that women are making choices based on their preferences, what they prefer to do. So she would criticise feminists. She would say feminists ignore the fact that we've gained equality. Part-time work is satisfactory, it's not unsatisfactory, so part-time work is useful and enjoyable, and that women can still have a career despite having childcare responsibilities. So the feminists are outdated, and we need to look further afield to global issues like sex trafficking and global exploitation of women. In the contemporary UK, we've achieved equality. Women are choosing to focus on their home role as well as paid work, and that's their choice. That's right. That's absolutely right. So the Interactionists, we could talk about Interactionists. We could say that theorists like Berger and Kellner argue that the roles we perform are based on the meanings in our culture. The meanings in our culture define the roles we perform. So parenthood and childhood are socially defined. So this suggests that the functionalists are wrong to exaggerate the natural basis of parenthood. They would say that this devalues alternatives to other forms of parenthood and child relationships. The Interactionists would say that increasingly we can make decisions actively deciding rather than being passively socialised into a culture to form the roles and relationships between parents and children. Yes. Well, we mentioned neo-conventional family. and functionalism. We could talk about how things have changed according to Wilmot and Young. They talk about symmetrical families with joint conjugal roles, where sharing of the housework and childcare between the man and the woman, the husband and wife. But this is criticised by Oakley, who says this is mainly affecting the middle class. Wilmot and Young's argument fits in with functionalism because it's the concept of the evolution of the family to meet the needs of society. So according to this perspective, parent-child relationships are changing because the UK society, the way in which we work and consume, is changing. For example, with more dual career families, you can see that trend is developing more shared roles between men and women. But Oakley says this is limited because of economic issues and cultural issues. The remarriage rate has risen, so we could mention several things there. Divorce has reached a plateau and started to drop or flatten out, so the divorce rate is not rising as it did after the 70s. In terms of remarriage, people are still aspiring to be in a married couple, two-parent relationship at the heart of a family. So while first-time marriages have dropped, remarriage has increased. And that shows people still are interested possibly in the traditional model of childhood and parent-child relationships, with parents as providers and children as dependents. So in conclusion, we could say that there are many ways in which parent-child relationships have changed socially, and politically, economically, culturally, because of changes in society. However, it's important not to overplay these changes, as there are many ways in which there are continuities with the past.